In the quiet outskirts of Houston, where the hustle of city life fades into a serene whisper, stood an unassuming cabin cloaked in memories and surrounded by whispers of the past. This modest home, weathered by time yet steadfast in its charm, had witnessed a love story, a lifetime of solitude, and an unexpected friendship that would alter destinies. Here, in this humble abode, the remarkable tale of Grace and Henry unfolds. One marked by trust, kindness, and an inheritance that defied all expectations. As twilight cast its golden glow upon the cabin, an extraordinary journey was about to begin, challenging the fabric of familial bonds and illuminating the profound impact of a selfless heart. Let's get into the story together. At 88, a remarkable woman faced a significant change in the twilight of her years. Her children arranged for her to move into a nursing home, leaving behind the cabin she had cherished. She wished to gift her modest home to a homeless man who had constantly supported her. However, her children intervened. When the homeless man finally gained access to the cabin, what he found inside was beyond belief. Following the death of her husband, Grace was left to navigate the solitude of a cabin nestled in Houston. Throughout her life, she managed to care for herself, but as time passed, the challenges became harder to overcome. At 88, Grace still tried to keep her home clean and well-maintained, but her physical strength and well-being were not as robust as they once were. One day, as she went about her routine, the phone rang. It was her eldest son, once again imploring her to consider moving into a nursing home. He believed she would benefit from professional care, activities, and social interaction. After careful consideration, Grace finally agreed, but she couldn't help but wonder what would happen to her beloved cabin and the small piece of land surrounding it, a place she had cherished her entire life. Her oldest son suggested selling the property and letting Grace keep the money, while her youngest son proposed renovating the cabin and renting it out for a monthly income. Although these ideas intrigued her, Grace believed she had a better solution: donating the cabin in its current condition to Henry, a homeless man from the local community whom she deeply respected and trusted. Despite her children's concerns about Henry's reliability, they reluctantly agreed to explore the possibility out of respect for their mother's wishes. Little did Henry and Grace's family know the precious gift awaited them inside the cabin. Henry, now 56 years old and mourning the loss of his wife for the past decade, carried the heavy burden of grief on his shoulders. Amid the bustling city streets, Henry's path crossed with Grace's 3 years ago. Buried with bags filled with market goods, Grace suddenly found herself in a predicament as her load spilled onto the pavement, causing fruits to scatter in every direction. Without hesitation, Henry sprang into action, swiftly gathering the scattered produce and even securing a replacement bag from a nearby store. Refusing any compensation, Henry insisted on shouldering the weight of Grace's bags, assuring her with the words, "Don't worry, I've got this covered." Little did Henry realize that this serendipitous encounter would lead to such a profound connection. That serendipitous encounter would forever change the trajectory of his life. From that fateful day onward, Henry became a devoted companion to Grace, accompanying her on shopping trips and attending to the needs of her cabin, never accepting a single penny in return despite Grace's persistent attempts to express her gratitude through monetary means. He observed that Grace lived in solitude, devoid of any extravagance. Each time he indulged in a delectable slice of cake and a steaming cup of coffee thoughtfully made by Grace, a profound sense of appreciation washed over him. As days turned into weeks, their separate paths began to intertwine, giving rise to a beautiful bond of friendship. Eventually, the kind-hearted man was invited to dine at her humble abode. In their relationship, there was mutual respect, and Henry always paid close attention to the advice given by the wise Grace. Grace, in particular, noticed that Henry's symptoms of depression had lessened. Over time, Henry found a sense of purpose when he could assist her however she needed. However, one day, Henry received the news that Grace would be moving to a nursing home, and his heart sank. Grace explained that her children had been relentlessly pressuring her for the past 2 years, calling her almost every day, urging her to leave the cabin and the land. The weight of this family pressure had become too much for her to bear. However, Grace was determined to spend her remaining days in the cabin that she and her late husband, James, had built together. In this life, not all our desires can be fulfilled, can they? Sighed the resigned woman. Henry embraced his friend, assuring her that she could always rely on him for assistance. He expressed his gratitude for everything she had done, granting him a taste of dignity and trust and motivating him to escape his homeless situation. It didn't take long, less than 2 weeks, before Grace was taken to a nursing home. The family made all the arrangements without consulting her, aiming for a swift and uncomplicated process, avoiding any debates or clashes of ideas with Grace. Henry never witnessed Grace's departure. He sensed that she must have left, as he never spotted her again in town. Occasionally, he would visit the cabin to ensure everything was in order. Henry was fortunate enough to encounter Grace's children at the cabin during one of these visits. Approaching with a friendly demeanor, he extended his hand and introduced himself. Curiosity piqued, he inquired about the whereabouts of his dear friend. To his surprise, the eldest son drove him away, accusing him of seeking money for liquor or other vices. This unexpected rudeness from Grace's usually polite children left Henry momentarily speechless. Despite feeling disoriented, he mustered the courage to ask once more about Grace's location. Instead of receiving an answer, the children aggressively chased him off their property, warning him never to return or they would call the police. Hurt by their behavior, Henry remained determined not to let it deter him from reconnecting with his friend. Since the children refused to disclose which nursing home Grace resided in, he resolved to uncover the information himself. Seeking assistance, he went to the local homeless shelter, where he approached the caretaker in search of a list of nursing homes he could consult. Through his efforts, he soon learned that there were 4 nursing homes scattered across the city. 2 were in the downtown area, while another was nestled in a slightly more remote neighborhood. The 4th, however, lay even further away, situated on the outskirts of town. Undeterred by the distance, he resolved to traverse whatever lengths were required to locate her. After freshening up with a shower at the shelter, he set out bright and early the following morning, determined to reunite with Grace. The first 2 nursing homes near the shelter where he had been staying yielded no sign of Grace. Undeterred, Henry continued his search, walking for another 40 minutes until he arrived at the 3rd home. To his disappointment, the Grace he found was not the one he sought. Determined, Henry pressed on, walking for an additional hour until he reached the main road leading him to the final nursing home on his list. Despite his fatigue and thirst, Henry continued relying on the occasional hitchhike to make his journey more accessible. Unfortunately, no one stopped to offer him a ride. 3 long hours later, his perseverance and unwavering determination kept him moving forward. Henry finally caught sight of the nursing home and trudged towards it, his exhaustion evident as he stepped inside. This was his last chance. Grace had to be here. He silently hoped to find her within these walls without even bothering to inquire at the reception. Confidently, he asked to visit Grace, who had moved in a few days ago. Despite visiting hours closing, they agreed to accommodate Henry's request, allowing him a quick visit. Guided to her room, he was left speechless by the sight before him. Grace lay there, appearing frail and unwell, a vulnerability he had never witnessed in her before. However, as soon as her eyes met Henry's at the door, a spark ignited, and a genuine smile graced her face. Henry approached Grace cautiously, his mind racing as he assessed her situation. The urgency in her gestures compelled him to draw nearer. "Don't waste time," she urged, her voice filled with urgency. "I have something important to share with you." Taking a seat beside her, Henry gently helped her sit up. Leaning closer, Grace whispered something in his ear that sent a shiver down his spine. "Is this for real?" he asked, struggling to believe what he had just heard. Grace patted his cheek, her touch comforting. She squeezed his hand and affirmed, "Yes, it's true. It belongs to you, and everything inside is yours, too." Everything. As the visiting hours ended, an employee from the nursing home informed Henry that he had to leave. He didn't know what to think of Grace's words, but he was saddened to see her in such a fragile state. She didn't seem like the same independent, determined older woman he knew. Perhaps the change was very recent, and she hadn't gotten used to it yet. Before leaving, he looked over his shoulder and saw Grace smiling. Little did he know that this fateful encounter would be the last time he laid eyes on his dear friend. The following morning, with the money he had left, Henry purchased a modest bouquet, retraced his steps, and walked the entire route to the nursing home again. However, upon arriving, he received the heartbreaking news that his friend had passed away the previous night. Overwhelmed with grief, tears streamed down his face as he stood there, unable to respond to the receptionist's inquiry about his lack of notification from Grace's family. Without uttering a word, he moved away, allowing the tears to cleanse his sorrowful countenance. Henry returned to the cabin that now belonged to him, thoughts of Grace consuming his mind, preventing him from fully embracing the gift. In that very instant, the house stood vacant, devoid of any signs of life. Determined to bring a sense of familiarity to the space, he resolved to brew a cup of coffee, much like Grace used to do for him. With a nostalgic ache in his heart, he reached up to the topmost cabinet in the kitchen, scanning its contents in search of the coffee powder. In front of the coffee, a cardboard box sat obstructing the way. As he attempted to remove it, the box slipped from his grasp and crashed onto the floor, causing quite a commotion. He bent down to retrieve it and realized the box was surprisingly heavy. Curiosity got the better of him, and he opened it, hoping that none of his friend's belongings were damaged. What he discovered inside left Henry speechless. There, neatly stacked, were bundles upon bundles of money, an amount that seemed straight out of a Hollywood movie. He carefully placed everything on the table and stared at it in awe. His mind raced to comprehend the implications of over 40 bundles containing $10,000, which added up to nearly $500,000. It was a fortune that Henry had only dreamed of, a windfall that could transform his life. He vividly recalled the conversation with Grace, who assured him the cabin and all its contents were rightfully his. Despite his initial disbelief, he gathered all the belongings into a worn, musty leather bag and made his way to the door with a clear plan. Over the next few days, Henry tastefully renovated the cabin, enhancing its appearance while preserving the original touches crafted by Grace and her spouse. He carefully curated the personal items left behind by the previous occupant, arranging them to resemble a museum exhibit. A stunning photograph of Grace found its place on the living room wall, accompanied by a flickering candle below. Henry's actions were not motivated by his inherited property or money. Instead, he wanted to demonstrate the immense value he placed on his friendship with Grace. It didn't take long for Grace's 2 children to arrive at the cabin and discover Henry residing there. Face to face with the testament of his deep connection with their late mother, they demanded to know what he thought he was doing there. Henry was honest. He explained that he had visited Grace in the nursing home before her death, and she had left the cabin and everything inside it to him. The children, convinced that Henry was both homeless and mentally unstable, couldn't believe that their parents' property had been given away so quickly to a homeless man they didn't even know. Henry regretted that they didn't believe his story but insisted it was true. He lamented even more that they, as Grace's children, had no idea about their own mother's last wishes. Upon hearing this, Grace's younger son wanted to go after Henry, stopping short of grabbing him by the collar. His older brother restrained him, warning that if he laid a hand on Henry, they would lose their reason, which could harm them legally later. Finally, the older brother said, "Let's handle this through the proper channels. We'll contest the claim legally if we have to." Sensing the tension and impending legal battle, Henry decided to leave before things escalated further. He knew Grace had trusted him with her final wishes, and he was determined to honor her memory, no matter the opposition. As he walked away from the cabin, Henry felt a mix of sadness and resolve. He had lost a dear friend and now faced a new challenge, but he was determined to prove his right to the cabin and preserve Grace's legacy. With $500,000 in the cabin, Henry was no longer the man he once was. He had the means to build a new life that Grace had made possible through her kindness and trust. To learn more about its history and condition, Grace's children were eager to sell, so they quickly arranged a meeting with Thomas. Meanwhile, Henry was making preparations of his own. Despite the police incident and the children's accusations, he remained determined to fulfill Grace's last wishes. After hearing his heartfelt story, he sought the help of a public defender who agreed to take on his case. The defender advised him to gather any possible evidence to support his claim and to stay out of trouble while the legal process unfolded. At the meeting, Thomas asked many questions about the cabin and its previous owner, including about the renovations and personal touches within the home. Unaware of Thomas's true intentions, Grace's children proudly boasted about their mother's hard work and the cabin's history. They mentioned that a homeless man named Henry had claimed ownership based on their mother's word, but they dismissed him as delusional. Thomas listened carefully, taking mental notes. He requested a tour of the cabin for himself, which the children eagerly provided. During the tour, Thomas couldn't help but notice the shrine dedicated to Grace and the meticulous care put into the home's maintenance. It was clear to him that Henry had genuine respect and love for Grace. After the tour, Thomas offered to purchase the cabin. Seeing a chance to rid themselves of the property quickly, the children accepted the offer without hesitation. The sale was set to be finalized within the week. Unbeknownst to Grace's children, Thomas was a friend of the public defender helping Henry. He had agreed to purchase the cabin on Henry's behalf to protect Grace's legacy and ensure that Henry could eventually reclaim the home. Thomas's purchase was a strategic move to buy time for Henry's case to be heard in court. As the legal battle continued, Henry stayed at the shelter, working closely with his public defender to gather testimonies from the community about his relationship with Grace. Neighbors and friends who had witnessed Henry's unwavering support for Grace came forward, providing statements highlighting the depth of their bond and Grace's expressed wishes to leave the cabin to him. When the court date arrived, Henry presented his case with his public defender's support and the community's testimonies. Confident in their position, Grace's children were caught off guard by the overwhelming evidence in Henry's favor. The judge, moved by the sincere accounts of Henry's dedication and Grace's apparent intentions, ruled in Henry's favor. Grace's children were ordered to transfer ownership of the cabin back to Henry and compensate him for any legal fees incurred. The restraining order was lifted, and Henry was free to return to the cabin that held so many memories and so much meaning for him. True to his word, Thomas handed over the cabin to Henry without hesitation. The money Henry had discovered, combined with the support of his newfound legal allies, allowed him to maintain the property and continue honoring Grace's memory. In the end, justice prevailed, and Henry was able to keep the promise he made to his dear friend. The cabin stood as a testament to the power of friendship, respect, and the unwavering belief in doing what is right. Henry's life had indeed changed forever, but the enduring legacy of Grace's kindness truly transformed him. Thomas inquired if the property could be used as a vacation home. The children didn't object but mentioned other interested buyers, stating that the best offer would secure the property. Thomas asked for the highest offer so far, and the older son revealed that a potential buyer had offered $90,000, to be paid in 3 separate deposits. Thomas momentarily fell silent on the other end of the line as if calculating or considering whether it was worth entering the auction. When he spoke again to Grace's children, he offered $100,000 in cash, full payment, provided the deal concluded as soon as they hung up the phone. The 2 children didn't need to think long about the proposal. They accepted and scheduled the completion of the transaction for 7 days later, exchanging money for the house key. The 2 children celebrated the sale and announced that they would use the time to dispose of all the junk left by the former occupant of the cabin. Thomas, however, said it wasn't necessary. If their idea were to get rid of what was in the cabin, he would pay $1,000 more to leave it as it was. Greedy, Grace's children then said the deal would be closed for $92,000, and nothing would be removed from the place. 7 days after the phony negotiation, Grace's 2 children went to the cabin to conclude the sale of their parents' house. A luxury sedan parked with 2 occupants arrived. A man aged between 40 and 50, in a suit, stepped out of the driver's seat and quickly introduced himself as Lawyer Thomas. The passenger remained in the vehicle. After exchanging greetings, Thomas and Grace's children began the transaction. The lawyer opened the suitcase and showed several bundles of money, passing the briefcase to the younger sibling. After counting the cash, the elder sibling handed over an envelope containing documents and the house key. "Congratulations, Thomas. This is now your getaway spot," he announced. However, Thomas humbly extended his hand, saying, "Don't congratulate me, gentlemen. I'm not the rightful owner of this splendid cabin. Grace's children exchanged surprised glances, perplexed by the unfolding situation. I'm just the middleman, Thomas stated. At that instant, the second person from the fancy car stepped out, dressed sharply with a beard, immaculate hair, and gleaming shoes. He looked familiar to Grace's kids, though they couldn't place him. As he approached, they recognized him as Henry, the homeless man. He's the one purchasing the property. All the cash in the briefcase is his. Please finalize the handover of the keys and paperwork to him, gentlemen. This story is a poignant exploration of human connection, resilience, and the complexities of familial relationships. Grace's unwavering trust in Henry, despite societal prejudices against his homelessness, speaks volumes about her character and the depth of their bond. It is a testament to the idea that true friendship and loyalty can transcend social boundaries and material possessions. Henry's journey from a homeless man to the rightful owner of Grace's cabin is heartwarming and tragic. It highlights the often overlooked dignity and worth of individuals experiencing homelessness, reminding us that everyone has a story and a capacity for profound impact. In their haste to secure their inheritance, Grace's children fail to recognize the true essence of their mother's final wishes. Their actions reflect a broader commentary on how materialism and mistrust can cloud judgment and erode familial bonds. The story also underscores the importance of legal documentation in ensuring one's wishes are honored after death. While heartfelt and genuine, Grace's verbal promise to Henry lacked the formal documentation needed to prevent legal disputes, leading to a bitter conflict that could have been avoided. Ultimately, the tale is a powerful reminder of the enduring power of kindness, the value of honoring one's word, and the impact of standing up for what is right, even in the face of adversity. It challenges us to look beyond appearances, cherish genuine connections, and remember that true wealth lies not in possessions but in the relationships and legacies we build.